So you wanted pale skin in medieval times? Well, congratulations. You just signed up for the most toxic makeup ever created. We're talking about Venetian ceruse here. A makeup that literally contained white lead and vinegar. You know, the same lead that makes people go insane. Even 16th century doctors warned against it. But here's the kicker. Everyone knew it was toxic. Queen Elizabeth I slathered this stuff on her face for decades, and it probably killed her. But hey, at least she looked ghostly pale while slowly poisoning herself to death. What drove entire courts to willingly smear poison on their skin? If this is revealing information you've never heard before, hit that like button to help other people discover this hidden history. Because I've got shocking revelations coming up that will completely change how you see medieval history. You know what screams wealth in medieval times? Looking like you've never seen sunlight in your entire life. I mean, we're talking about a time when having skin so pale it was basically transparent was the ultimate flex. This wasn't just some random beauty trend either. Pale skin was a status flex. Peasant tan was proof you'd been slogging outdoors. Noble ladies would literally compete to see who could look the most corpse-like at court gatherings. I'm just saying, imagine walking into a party and everyone's trying to look like they just crawled out of a tomb. That was peak fashion back then. This obsession with deathly pale skin created a massive market for skin whitening products that would make modern beauty standards look tame. You had nobles spending their entire fortunes on concoctions that promised to make them look like walking ghosts. Apothecaries became rich selling various mixtures, potions, and pastes to anyone desperate enough to achieve that perfect pale complexion. Alternatives like crushed mother of pearls existed, but nobles still preferred ceruse for its superior coverage and flawless finish. But one product dominated the market completely. The demand was so high that people would pay outrageous amounts for the most effective whitening paste available. We're talking about prices that could feed entire families for months, all for a jar of skin poison. Rich ladies would hoard these products like they were made of gold. Court gatherings turned into competitions where ladies would show up looking progressively more pale and artificial. You'd have women comparing their ghostly complexions like we compare Instagram filters today. The paler you looked, the more respect you got from other nobles. Enter Venetian ceruse, the Rolls-Royce of deadly makeup that promised the perfect pale complexion. This stuff was the holy grail of medieval cosmetics. Made in Venice, it had this reputation for creating the most flawless white finish you could imagine. Noble ladies would write letters to their contacts in Venice, begging them to ship more of this magical paste. The product became so famous that having access to genuine Venetian ceruse was like owning a luxury car. But getting that status symbol look came with a price tag that went way beyond money. You see, Venetian ceruse wasn't just expensive, it was literally made from white lead mixed with vinegar, the same lead that we now know causes brain damage, organ failure, and death. But back then, looking rich was more important than staying alive. These people were willing to slowly poison themselves just to maintain their social status. The irony is that the richer you were, the more you could afford to buy this toxic paste. So the wealthiest people in society were actually the ones killing themselves the fastest. Poor people couldn't afford the good stuff, so they had to settle for safer but less effective alternatives. In a weird way, being poor actually saved your life, because you couldn't afford the premium poison that rich people were smearing on their faces every morning. This whole system created a cycle where the upper class was literally dying to look good. They literally bled money and health to wear a pale mask. They knew the risks, but the social pressure was so intense that they kept using these deadly products anyway. And nobody embodied this deadly obsession more than the most powerful woman in all of England. So what happens when the most powerful woman in England gets smallpox scars? She turns to literal poison for a makeover. In 1562, Queen Elizabeth I caught smallpox, a disease with a 70% survival rate that left her face looking like a battlefield of scars and pockmarks. I mean, we're talking about the Virgin Queen here, the woman who had to project absolute power and authority. You can't exactly rule an empire when your face looks like someone took a cheese grater to it, right? Instead of accepting her natural appearance, she decided to create what historians call her mask of youth. Using the deadliest makeup ever invented, Elizabeth began applying thick layers of Venetian ceruse daily, creating an artificial face that became her signature look. You know, the same white lead paste that was slowly killing everyone else. But hey, when you're the Queen of England, you get the premium poison. She wasn't messing around with some cheap knockoff ceruse from a local apothecary. This was the good stuff imported straight from Venice. The mixture was simple but deadly. Lead carbonate paste mixed with vinegar, according to a 1688 recipe that shows just how potent this stuff was. So you're having a conversation with the most powerful woman in Europe, and every time she changes facial expressions, toxic chunks flaked off like a crumbling mask. Courtiers described her face as looking like a painted doll, with makeup so heavy it would shed during meetings. I'm just saying, imagine trying to have a serious political discussion while the person you're talking to is literally shedding pieces of their face. She applied this toxic paste not just to her face but to her neck, hands and décolletage for a uniform ghostly appearance. Elizabeth wasn't taking any chances with uneven skin tone. You know how modern influencers obsess over matching their foundation to their neck? Well, the Queen was doing the same thing, except with poison that could absorb directly through her skin. Modern spectrometer studies show that lead from ceruse penetrated deep into tissue, making every application a slow-motion death sentence. The application process was intense too. Her servants would mix fresh batches of ceruse daily, grinding the white lead with vinegar until it formed the perfect consistency. Then they'd paint it onto her skin layer by layer, building up this thick coating that completely transformed her appearance. The final result was so artificial that people who met her described it as looking like a walking porcelain statue rather than a human being. The irony? The makeup that was supposed to hide her scars actually created new damage to her skin underneath. The lead was eating away at her flesh while she slept, creating fresh wounds and blemishes that required even more ceruse to cover up. It was like putting a bandage on a wound that keeps getting bigger because the bandage itself is making it worse. Users became trapped in a vicious cycle where the more they used it, the more they needed it, and the closer they got to death. You couldn't stop using the makeup because your natural skin looked like a disaster zone underneath, but you couldn't keep using it because it was literally killing you. Some women tried to quit cold turkey, but their skin had become so damaged and discolored that they looked worse than before they started. Chronic lead exposure also caused hypertension and infertility, destroying their chances of having healthy children while slowly shutting down their cardiovascular system. The irony is that while they were achieving that perfect ghostly complexion everyone envied, their bodies were basically shutting down one system at a time. Their kidneys were failing, their brains were deteriorating, and their muscles were giving up, but their faces gleamed with that coveted pale perfection at every social gathering. But if you think smearing lead poison on your face was the height of medieval beauty madness, you haven't heard anything yet, because while nobles were slowly killing themselves with toxic face paint, they were also putting something even more dangerous directly into their eyes. Belladonna drops took this toxic beauty routine to an even deadlier level. Medieval beauty standards demanded large, sparkling eyes that looked ethereal and otherworldly. You know, because apparently having normal-sized pupils was for peasants. The solution? Deadly nightshades squeezed directly into the eyes to dilate pupils. This practice actually dates back to Roman times, when women first discovered that pupil dilation created an alluring, wide-eyed appearance. The name Belladonna means beautiful woman in Italian, which is pretty ironic considering it made women go blind. Women would apply these drops before social events, creating unnaturally large pupils that made them look doll-like. Picture this. You're getting ready for a fancy court gathering, and instead of putting on mascara, you're literally dripping plant poison into your eyes. The whole process involved extracting juice from the deadly nightshade plant and applying it directly to the eyeball. No fancy dropper bottles or sterile applicators either. At first, the effect seemed magical. Eyes appeared larger, more luminous, and definitely got attention from suitors. You would walk into a room with these huge, dilated pupils that made you look like some kind of otherworldly creature. Men would be drawn to this wide-eyed, ethereal appearance because it fit perfectly with the beauty standards of the time. It was like having a permanent Instagram filter, except the filter was slowly destroying your vision. But the atropine in belladonna is a powerful neurotoxin that doesn't mess around with your nervous system. You know how doctors use atropine today in controlled doses for eye exams? Well, medieval women were basically giving themselves unregulated eye exams every time they wanted to look pretty. The stuff was entering their bloodstream through their eyes and wreaking havoc on their entire nervous system. One drop, and your eyes widened along with each hallucination and eventual blindness. Users started experiencing blurred vision, making it hard to navigate stairs or read without stumbling around. Imagine trying to walk down a flight of stone steps when everything looks like you're seeing it through frosted glass. These women would be attending important social functions, trying to look elegant and sophisticated, while secretly struggling to see where they were going. They'd bump into furniture, miss their chairs when trying to sit down, and squint at people trying to figure out who they were talking to. The temporary nature of belladonna's effects meant women had to keep reapplying it, increasing their exposure to the toxic compounds. Each application brought them closer to permanent damage. Their eyes would become increasingly sensitive to light, making daytime activities almost impossible. The constant use of this neurotoxin was systematically destroying their optic nerves and brain function. Long-term use led to permanent blindness, meaning the quest for beautiful eyes ended with no vision at all. The irony is devastating. Women were destroying their eyesight to make their eyes look more attractive. They sacrificed sight for a glance that never really saw them back. So basically, women were choosing to go blind just to look more attractive at parties. But apparently, having poisoned skin and ruined eyesight still wasn't enough to complete the perfect medieval look. The final touch required mercury-based blush to complete this toxic masterpiece. Pale skin was great, but you still needed that hint of color to look healthy. Enter cinnabar and vermilion blushes. These vibrant red pigments were made from mercury sulfide, with vermilion derived directly from ground cinnabar. We're talking about the same mercury that makes thermometers so dangerous when they break, except medieval ladies were grinding it up and rubbing it all over their faces. Women would grind cinnabar into fine powder, mix it with binders and create a paste that was basically neurotoxic mercury attacking brains cell by cell. The mercury absorbed through facial skin and lips, attacking the nervous system while providing that coveted healthy glow. You know how modern makeup artists talk about products that give you a natural flush? Well, this was the exact opposite, an unnatural flush that came with brain damage as a bonus feature. The mercury sulfide would seep through their pores and enter their bloodstream, traveling straight to their nervous system and setting up camp there like the world's worst houseguest. Users developed tremors that made hands shake uncontrollably, memory loss that erased conversations within hours, and mood swings that turned gentle ladies into screaming strangers. The mercury was literally eating away at their brain tissue, destroying the neural pathways responsible for forming and storing memories. Some women would introduce themselves to the same person multiple times in a single day because the mercury had turned their brains into Swiss cheese. These ladies would go from perfectly pleasant to screaming at servants over nothing in the span of minutes. The combination of lead face paint and mercury blush created a toxic cocktail that attacked multiple organ systems simultaneously. Think about it. You've got lead destroying your digestive system and muscles, while mercury attacks your nervous system and brain. It was like having two different poisons competing to see which one could kill you faster. The lead would make their stomachs cramp, while the mercury made their hands shake, creating this perfect storm of toxic symptoms. Medieval women were essentially wearing a full face of neurotoxic mercury attacking brains cell by cell, slowly destroying their minds and bodies for fashion. Every morning they'd wake up and apply a deadly combination of lead-based foundation and mercury-based blush, turning their daily beauty routine into a slow-motion suicide attempt. The irony is that while they were achieving that perfect pale complexion with rosy cheeks that everyone envied, their bodies were systematically shutting down one organ at a time. Rosy cheeks, rotted minds. That was the medieval beauty trade-off. But here's the thing about this toxic beauty obsession that might surprise you. Men were just as eager to join this deadly beauty competition. Kings, courtiers, and nobles realized that looking good was essential for political power and social status. I mean, you can't exactly rule a kingdom or negotiate trade deals when you look like you've been living in a cave for months. So they started using the exact same deadly products, proving that stupidity in the name of beauty was truly universal. Reports suggest King James I may have used ceruse to hide his smallpox scars, slathering the same lead-based poison on his face that was killing women. Picture this. The King of England, the guy who's supposed to be running the country, is sitting in his royal chambers every morning getting his face painted with toxic paste. He'd have servants mixing up fresh batches of Venetian ceruse, grinding white lead with vinegar until it formed that perfect deadly mixture. Then they'd apply it to his face, neck and hands, turning him into a walking corpse just like all the noble ladies at court. French court records show elaborate male grooming included lead powders and lice-ridden wigs that turned personal appearance into performance art. You know how modern guys might spend 20 minutes on their hair? Well, these dudes were spending hours getting their faces painted, their wigs adjusted, and their entire appearance transformed into something that barely looked human. The French court became this bizarre competition where grown men were trying to out-poison each other with their beauty routines. Men wore elaborate wigs that harbored lice and used the same mercury-based rouge that was destroying women's nervous systems. I'm just saying, imagine wearing a wig crawling with bugs while also rubbing brain-damaging mercury all over your cheeks. These guys would show up to important political meetings looking like they'd stuck their finger in an electrical socket, with their powdered wigs and artificially rosy cheeks. The mercury was making their hands shake during treaty negotiations, but hey, at least they looked fashionable while slowly losing their minds. The male beauty routine included lead-based skin whiteners, toxic perfumes, and enough powder to choke a horse. These guys weren't messing around with subtle makeup either. They'd cake on layers of white lead foundation, dust themselves with toxic powder until they looked like walking flour sacks, and douse themselves in perfumes that contained enough poisonous chemicals to kill small animals. Court gatherings became competitions of who could look the most unnaturally pale and perfectly groomed. You'd walk into Versailles and see these grown men wobbling around in their high heels, faces painted white as ghosts, cheeks bright red from mercury poisoning, and wigs so elaborate they needed architectural support. They'd be having serious conversations about war and politics while their mercury-damaged brains made them forget what they were talking about mid-sentence. The tremors from lead poisoning made it hard to sign important documents, but at least they looked absolutely stunning while their organs failed. The irony is that these men were using makeup to project power and authority, but the toxic ingredients were literally making them weaker and more confused. They'd rather die looking like artificial perfection than live looking normal. Vanity didn't spare kings or commoners. Everyone was a target for this deadly obsession with appearance. But here's what makes this whole toxic beauty craze even more insane. The craziest part? Physicians were literally writing warnings about these toxic cosmetics, but people kept using them anyway. Giovanni Maranello wrote about the dangers of ceruse back in 1562, giving it a thumbs down and telling people this stuff would kill them. Beauty standards trumped survival. Noble ladies and kings alike chose poison over a tan. Medieval beauty wasn't about self-care, it was about self-sacrifice for social status, and everyone involved knew exactly what they were signing up for. If you thought modern skincare was wild, hit subscribe and let us know the craziest beauty myth you've heard. Next time you whine about finding the right shade of foundation, remember at least it won't kill you.